because it's not all one.
Because they have to be more with the textures and the luminizing.
Not running that legal stuff. But I get your point.
I got it right now, if you see the landscape, it's very depressing, they say, you can't protect any of that
If
stuff.
that was the one variable that matters most, on the differential deviations, then I think we're in great shape with the maps. I think that it's the continuity question that is more perplexing with the challenge that we have with the Route District versus the highway connection. You know, that issue, but the highway district, by virtue of where they connect, takes completely different.
This is also the HDMI for this slide. If you want to sit down while you're presenting.
Oh no, it'd be easier to stand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or not when you're presenting, but like when people are testifying and you're having to go through the map, if you get tired.
Yeah, it's fine. I can stand. I have no issue.
People it's how you pay for your roads. It's how you elect to have your taxes spent. It's where you have a septic in the wall versus a water system that is connected to the municipal utility. To me, it's those are the things that are close to my representations. That they know how my system works for me. That's what they share. Spots, septic systems. Really, like dominated neighborhoods is another thing when we go there. Because to me, we get there with the simple services.
It's a fact that they're in 4,000 people, and it will never be able to
Good, how are you?
Hello, do we have someone join us? Hey Forrest, this is Claire. We're just still milling about. The volume's probably going to be pretty quiet, so maybe if you put in headphones, that'll help. Okay.
I'm here for her. I don't know if you could hear me.
Oh, hey, Austin.
Are we gonna stay down here?
So what do you think? Did you guys talk about whether you want to?
Yeah, there's because the HDMI cord has to also. I'll just stand.
Okay.
I mean, it's fine.
I wonder if we could come up with a stool or something. I'd have you just standing there for jobs.
It's like a standing desk. No, it's totally fine. Sure. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have about 5 audience members and then a bunch of staff and assembly members. watching the YouTube live. Do you get
Laura, please.
Leah. She's just hanging out in the atrium. If people.
Yeah, I just emailed
Yeah, I
them
had
a little bit
I had
about
Laurel
but it's
call in last night, and then I had Leah come in because Laurel lives out in the valley, and so.
Oh, right, good point, good point. Diane suggested a change today that I had Mandy implement, which was on the redistricting webpage. It says resource data map 1, resource data map 2, and then a description. I just had to strip out resource data, which is map 1.
Yeah,
No big deal.
I wasn't sure if that was.
Hear from the map makers.
Crystal, did you just join us?
Can we turn the lights up just a little bit? Thank you. Oh, that was the time. So far away over there. Yeah. Hi. What did I do?
And so I walked somebody through that. It's a little tiny link with no explanation, and then there's all these maps listed under it. So naturally you go to click on
Test.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody.
Just
Are we recording clear?
Yep.
Wonderful. Is that the recording that will go up on the website?
Yeah, that's going to
Okay, perfect.
especially.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second town hall on the municipal reapportionment process. And tonight we have just a handful of folks in the room. Last night we had a virtual Teams live town hall event, and we had the luxury and benefit of all of the map makers in the Teams live event who submitted maps, and I don't see any of them here except for our contractor, which I'm grateful for. And before we get started with the program, we're going to ask Claire, our MC, to take the roll.
All right, Mr. Constant,
Here.
Miss Allard, Mr. Dunbar,
Here.
Ms. Kennedy,
Here.
Ms. LaFrance,
Here.
Mr. Perez Verdia, Mr. Peterson,
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Here.
Mr. Rivera,
Present.
Mr. Whittleton,
Here.
Ms. Zalatel. All right.
Thank you. And then our,
This is Miss Allard. I'm actually here.
Oh, great, Miss Allard.
thank you. Next, we'll introduce our contractors. We have Ashley Reiser and we have Dennis Wheeler from RDI, Resource Data Inc., who have graciously been working with us in this pretty intensive process to get through all the steps necessary to achieve a reapportioned municipality. So before we get into the question and answer part of the evening and a briefing on specific maps, I'm going to present a brief introduction to the reapportionment process and why we are here. So I think we have slides for this.
Yeah, they're up. Do you want me to run it?
Please. So I'm going to have to turn because I didn't bring a printed copy. But in the upper left, you see the U.S. Census is completed in spring of 2021. You'll note that that's approximately a year late from when it was supposed to be completed, or at least 8 months or so. And that was because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which created a number of problems in the process. So that pushed the state's process behind the calendar. And, oh, thank you. The state went through their process and finished up in a pretty timely manner and published their final plan maps on November 10th. The Assembly followed suit quite quickly after that. November 23rd passed a resolution declaring that the municipality is malapportioned. Apportionment essentially means the number of people equally distributed across the number of districts in the community. And again, the census every 10 years asks the question, where are the people living and how many in what places of the United States? The state sets up its redistricting process. Our reapportionment looks very closely at our neighborhoods. We determined we were malapportioned in a very easy way. The voters in 2020 passed Proposition 12, which provides that upon the publication of the state's final plan, Anchorage adds a 12th member to its assembly. And so the process of implementing that charter amendment requires us going through this reapportionment process so that we can add the number of residents into the downtown district and make it equal in size to the rest of the districts. So the total size after all of the state reapportionment, the state redistricting process and the federal census came down with 6 districts, as we need to have 6 districts with as close to 48,541 residents each. And that number is pretty important because you see a number up there. It says in the upper right-hand corner, if 10% deviation spread, then reapportionment is needed. We then secured a contract with RDI to help us run through this process, do the public comment, and manage that part of the process and draft new maps. Sample maps were issued late last year, and then early this year, and we asked the public to present to us a series of maps. We provided the public an opportunity to submit maps that they might have drawn on their own, and if those maps met the basic standards that are required by law, they were included.
The next step is we go through these public processes. We have this town hall, we have some work sessions, we have a couple of public hearings, and the assembly adopts a selected map. And then those maps will be implemented in the 2023 election. They won't be completed for the election that is coming up because we would have needed to have these maps and this process completed pretty much November 1st in order to have been running an election based on the maps, because it takes time to address and ensure that the ballots are going to the right people at the right place. So on the next slide, you can see basically the deviation in red circles up there. Because we have changed the apportionment to have 6 equal districts instead of 5 equal districts and 1/2 district, the deviation of District 1 from the 48,541 is 81% off, or minus 21,725 people. So the process requires that we add that many people to the downtown district. And then it also shows that District 6 has 11.79% more residents than that 48,541, which is 6,491 people that have to move out of that district and into another part of town. And so, essentially, you can see a map of the current districts as they stand. And we'll go to the next slide. It's important to keep in mind the variables that have to be accounted for in the process. We can't simply draw lines where we want. The lines have to ensure that districts are compact, contiguous, and relatively integrated socioeconomically, according to the Anchorage Charter, section 4.01. We have to ensure equal protection of one person and one vote. The deviation in actual to target populations must be less than 10% between the highest and lowest districts. There is some question about that standard under Alaska law, and I'm sure we're going to hear about that a little bit. It also states that a district with over 5% deviation must have a very compelling reason. And finally, boundaries cannot be racially discriminatory under federal law. Now we have the timeline. The timeline is set. We've been working on this for quite a while. As I mentioned, the federal census was done in early 2021. The state finalized their maps November 10th. The Assembly had a final declaration of malapportionment on November 23rd. Draft maps were published to the website on December 29th. The committee met on January 6th to finalize the timeline and to set up a plan for these town halls and other public input processes. We set a deadline for January 20th of deadline for submissions of third-party maps. Here we are. Yesterday we had the Teams Live event town hall, and today we're having a live town hall at the Loussac Library, the William Theater. Then tomorrow we'll be meeting as a committee to review feedback and create a plan for introduction of an ordinance. Ordinance needs to be introduced in a timely manner to get onto the agenda for introduction on February 15th. So sometime between the 28th and the 11th, we'll be having an item ready for introduction. The 15th, the item will be introduced. Then on February 24th, we're going to hold a special meeting where we'll have a public hearing just on the maps as we're moving forward through the process. And then on March 1st, we'll have a second public hearing. The Assembly does generally have a single public hearing for items, but on items of significant importance, we sometimes have 2 public hearings, like the budget requires 2 public hearings. And in this case, because this is significant change that will impact the next 10 years, we've opted to hold 2 public hearings to ensure the public has maximum opportunity to participate. Between those 2 meetings, we'll have a work session to incorporate any feedback or address any potential changes that need to happen from the first public hearing to the second. And then finally, on or around March the 1st, we will take up the question of the final plan map and adopt sometime thereabouts the final plan map. And as I stated before, these maps will be effective upon passage, but the next election that will take place under these maps will be the April 2023 election. So that's kind of an overview of the process that we've been working on. As you can see, we're pretty far down the line. Oh, there's one last slide. Here's how you can follow along the process most closely is keep tabs on the page reapportionanc.org. Everything we're doing is there. And there's an opportunity on that page to submit a comment that gets entered into the permanent record and is influencing how we make our decision on this process. Again, we have these 2 open houses, last night and tonight. There's going to be a 3rd open house hosted by the representatives from Eagle River from 5 to 7 p.m. on February 3rd at the Chugach Eagle River Town Center in room 170. And finally, if you were out in the lobby, you saw a bunch of really nice looking maps. These are all of the proposed maps that came to us. There were 10, and they're in each of the municipal libraries, from here to Girdwood or from Chugach to Girdwood. And those maps will likely be updated in the next several days to have the current 10 that were collectively and properly before us by the 20th, that deadline that was established. So now, I see that we have one of the drafters of the map here. Are any of the drafters of the other maps on the phone?
Mr. Chairman, this is David Dunsmore from the Loussac Fairway District, and I'm on the line.
All right, so I see, or I hear David Dunsmore online. I believe we have Denny Wells in the audience and Robert Hockma. And so I think that there's one then that's not here. I forget who that was. I'll check my notes from yesterday. And then we also have Ashley Reiser and Dennis Wheeler from the Contractor RDI who drafted some maps. So on the run of show, the next thing to do is to have Dennis take over the conversation and introduce us to the process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Dennis Wheeler. I'm one of the senior project managers with Resource Data. Resource Data is a locally grown company here in Anchorage. We've been in business for about 30 years. We have over 30 years, actually. We have offices not only here in Anchorage, but also in Juneau, Houston, Texas, Boise, Idaho, and Portland, Oregon. So we have a pretty extensive team working with mapping issues, including redistricting. So we're pleased to be able to be here today and help in the process. With me is Ashley Reiser. She leads the team of GIS programmers who worked on the maps. One thing I want to highlight regarding where we are in Anchorage in terms of the legal requirements is to point out that the Alaska Supreme Court has noted in a 2002 decision that newly available technologies, which of course have advanced another 20 years now, make it possible to get very low deviations between districts, especially in urban areas. And as such, the court said, Anchorage is by definition a socio-economically integrated area, and its population is sufficiently dense and evenly spread out to allow multiple combinations of compact, contiguous districts with minimal population deviations, which is why you'll see a lot of discussion about trying to get the deviations between districts as small as possible. And yet, we still need to pay attention to other concerns such as Voting Rights Act requirements with respect to minority representation, because we certainly don't want to create maps that diminish minority voting power. With that, I'm going to move to just a short description of the maps themselves. You'll note that there are, as mentioned, 10 maps. Resource Data created 4 of the 10 to stimulate conversation without any particular goal in mind other than to think about in a broad stroke, what if District 1 goes north? What if District 1 moves south? What if District 1 moves south and east? These are concept or conversation maps. I don't expect that they satisfy all of the interests of all the various different groups that are interested in these, but we hope that they do provoke a discussion. And fortunately, we have another 6 that were provided by members of the public. So we have a broad selection of maps to look at and discuss. I believe with that, Claire, we're going to bring Ashley up to navigate through the maps. Last time we started with map 2 until we could get Mr. Green connected. Is Mr. Green on the line today?
Matt, are you there?
Okay, so Ashley will start with map 1, but map 1 is the one submitted by Mr. Green.
So the first thing I want to do is just briefly show you how you navigate. Sure.
I think if you just hit enter.
Okay, show you how you navigate to the online map page. This is the primary way that we envision most people interacting with these maps. if you come to the reapportionment Anchorage site, this is the main site. One side note, we did mention to submit public comments. That function is right here. You can just click on this button to submit the comment. If you continue scrolling, you'll see the reapportionment map section. This will bring up the site that has all of the PDF maps, which are here. Clicking on any of these will open a PDF version of the map. Alternatively, you can click the online map viewer here, and that will open this set of 10 of the 10 different maps. Overall, what we have for each map is just a brief title if it's a public submission to identify the individual or group who submitted the map. We have standard map functionality, so zoom in, zoom out, come back to home. Home will be this view you have right here. And the legend on the right will show you what the different symbols and colors for these areas represent. So we'll be talking about each of these, but just if you need to reference the colors, just click this drop down on your legend. All right, with that, we'll start with the first map. This was submitted by Matt Green. Sorry, this laptop is not as quick as my mouse. Okay. So one of the most obvious changes that you'll see with this map is the expansion of District 1 up into J-Bear. The current boundary of District 1 is this blue line here. So all of this area would become part of District 1. You'll also see that it expands over east to, I believe that's Boniface. Pine Street, okay. So it expands east to Pine Street, and then south here, it gains this portion that is currently in District 4. So that's the major change that you'll see with respect to District 1. District 2, to accommodate that change, loses this area that's now in District 1. And then to the south, you'll see this yellow boundary here. This is the current boundary of District 6. So you can see that District 2 expands southward into what is currently District 6. And then it, sorry, just bring this so you can see it. It now terminates along Huffman Road and then takes over part of Hillside. District 3, I think by the third map I'll get the zoom down with this computer. District 3 loses this section here. The current boundary of District 3 is this line here. District 3 is reduced by this area south of Diamond to Campbell Lake. But there are no other major changes for District 3. District 4 is the purple here. The current boundary, you can see here in orange for the eastern boundary. So District 4 is going to expand all the way to the east of what is currently District 5. And it'll maintain its boundary on Abbott, where it currently is, but it will be reduced by this area south of Diamond that becomes part of District 6. And then the major change for District 5 is the reduction of area, which was primarily the portion that's over far north by Centennial Park. It will now terminate along East Tudor Road. And then it goes now, the current district boundary is here for District 5, so it's reduced by this area to Pine Street. And if we zoom out, a major aerial change for District 6, of course, because it's reduced by all of this area to the east. But the primary for residential areas is this expansion up to West Diamond, and then the reduction here. So that's all I can say about this map that was submitted by Matt. We'll move on now to map 2. So map 2, District 1 is the district here in red. Current boundary is here. This will move south to Tudor Road, and then it will move east to Pine Street. Those are the major changes here. Zoom out so you can see District 2. District 2 will remain largely unchanged. But you do see that District 2 currently includes this area south of Boundary Ave, so it will be reduced by this residential area south of Boundary Ave. District 3, the southern boundary, again, will shift north to West Diamond, being reduced by this area of Campbell Lake. And it gains this area that's currently in District 4. Here we go. That's sandwiched between Arctic, C Street, Tudor, and East 36th. District 4, which is in purple here, is being reduced south to East Tudor. There's a reduction of this area we just talked about, but the southern boundary will now push down along Minnesota to O'Malley, and then to the east of Birch, and then it maintains its existing boundary here along south of Hillside Park, all the way over to the current boundary with District 5, so no change there. District 5, to accommodate the expansion of District 1 here to Pine Street, is reduced by this area to the west of Pine Street. And then it gains the neighborhood south of Boundary Drive that was previously included, or is currently included in District 2. And finally, District 6, the major change we discussed here, where District 4 moves down into the current boundary of District 6. So there's a reduction of this area that you see in purple, but a gain of this area south of Diamond. Okay, and, excuse me, and then I'll mention here, we have a brief description. We also have the deviation tables for each of the maps. The deviation for this particular map is 7.75%. The way that that is calculated is taking the absolute values of the greatest deviation and then the most negative deviation and adding them together. So it is the sum of just those two absolute values, which is where we come up with 7.75. Okay, map 3. All right, so District 1 is going to expand southward to Northern Lights, and then eastward to Boniface. There's a portion here that's adjacent to District 2 that is also taken on by District 1. Okay. And here you see that District 2, again, is largely unchanged. We do have a reduction of this neighborhood again south of Boundary Drive that becomes part of District 5. District 3 the same reduction from the previous map where this area, Campbell Lake area, south of Diamond, becomes part of District 6. But then there's this area here expanding along Diamond to C Street that becomes part of District 3. And then again, this area here, which was previously north of Tudor to Northern Lights, was part of District 4. That would now be included in District 3. Okay. District 4 has some pretty significant spatial changes. So it will move south to O'Malley. Oops. South to O'Malley. And then the eastern boundary, which was previously where currently where you see this boundary here, would move all the way to Elmore. Oh my gosh, okay, sorry. Okay, all the way to Elmore. So it's reduced in area by this portion south of Diamond that becomes 6, and then all of this area to the east of Elmore would become District 5. You can see the current boundary here of District 4, so that is moved southward to Benson. And then we also have the addition of the residential area here over to Boniface and southern boundary of Tudor. District 5 we've talked about as we've been going over the other boundaries, but just to summarize, the neighborhood south of Boundary Ave becomes part of District 5. And then we have this area over to Boniface is distributed to other districts. And then there's the gain of this area all the way down to Huffman, capped by Hillside Drive. District 6 moves north to the southern boundary of West Diamond, and then again is just a reflection of the other changes that we've seen, where the boundary accommodates District 4 to O'Malley and District 5 to Huffman. This map, I'll zoom out to give you the full picture here. The overall deviation for this map is 4.62%. And you'll see, of course, all 10 maps that we have a overall deviation of less than 10%, which is the federal requirement. All right, map 4. District 1 will be the largest change that we see. And here we have District 1 expanding into one of the major residential areas of J-Bear. It will come south along Boniface, and then the southern boundary will become Northern Lights. We'll skip to District 3 real quick since we're zoomed in. So District 3 will move to C Street along this boundary. And then what was previously part of District 3, this area south of West International Airport along Minnesota, becomes District 4. The southern boundary, the Campbell Lake area south of Diamond, becomes District 6. District 4, you see the shift down to East Tudor. The expansion we just talked about over into what is currently District 3. You can see that's the current district boundary. And then south along Minnesota to O'Malley, and then up Elmore. District 5 takes over this community south of Boundary Ave, and then is reduced for District 1 along Boniface and Northern Lights here. It gains this area over to C Street and north of Tudor. And then to the south, it gains this entire region south to Abbott, and then along Birch and O'Malley, and Elmore here. The overall, here we go. The overall change for District 6 that we've talked about is this, really the addition of this neighborhood, and then the reduction here to accommodate District 4 moving southward and District 5 moving southward. The overall deviation of this map is 2.54%. And with that, we'll move on to the last resource data map. Here's the overall view. District 1, you'll see is going to move over to Boniface. Whoa, sorry. Okay, so we'll move over to Boniface and then south to Northern Lights. District 3 here is reduced by this area north of Northern Lights along Minnesota that is currently part of District 3. So it would be reduced by that. And then here, south of Diamond, you'll see that reduction. And the gain of the neighborhood north of West Diamond over to C Street. District 4 moves down to Northern Lights. And then the southernmost, O'Malley here. Right, and it takes on a number of neighborhoods throughout this area. Oh, excuse me, sorry, that was the other side. Here along Brayton Drive, down to O'Malley. So it takes on this section, and then it, let me zoom out so you can see. It is reduced by this area to the north, which is currently District 4, becomes District 5. So that's the summary for District 4. District 5 is reduced to Muldoon, which becomes part of District 2. And then the significant change here is that District 5 takes on a majority of the population center for J-Bear. And then the southern boundary that we already saw is going to follow Dowling to Elmore, and then down to Hillside here. District 6 gains this neighborhood that is currently part of District 5, and then moves up north to West Diamond, and then is reduced by the area between O'Malley and Abbott Road for District 4. The overall deviation for this map is 4.06. Zoom out, and with that, those are the resource data maps. The next map was submitted by Anchorage Action, and sorry, don't know people's actual faces. All right, I'll pass it to you. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Ashley, for the folks that are on the phone, we may ask you to come back up to help
Yes.
navigate. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. You have the floor. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So Anchorage Action is a nonprofit organization that encourages engagement with local government. It was kind of in response to a lot of things, but what we attempted to do was to draw a map that reflected what most Anchoragites would insinuate are the intuitive boundaries for these respective assembly districts. We didn't look at any partisan data. We didn't look at the addresses of incumbents. This is just where we think things should go. There's kind of a couple notable points here. It looks a lot like the current assembly map in a lot of ways, but there's a couple key differences. Downtown stretches down into kind of what is central Midtown, and and excludes some of the areas that bleed over into the UMed area that should belong to Midtown instead. It also pushes a little bit east over into the Reapportionment area west of Pine Street, and it stops at the Government Hill precinct borderline and includes Mountain View as well. District 2. District 2 looks exactly like it does now in the current status quo, except it takes away the North Muldoon finger, this area up by Bartlett High School right here, and then the 1,400 people that live here and the remainder of this precinct. And it returns them back to their socioeconomically integrated area of East Anchorage, which leaves this District 2 about 1,400 people short of perfect deviation. And otherwise, it's the exact same. And stops below the boundary, below the Chugach Mountains. District 3, west, looks incredibly similar. On the southern border, it does the same thing that the RDI maps does, which is it stops at the Campbell Lake area, or excuse me, it sheds off the Campbell Lake area. Over here by the Arctic area, it also sheds some territory over to the Midtown area, but for the most part, it follows C Street as the dividing line between Midtown and West. Map 4, excuse me, District 4, which is Midtown, we talked about loses these areas to downtown as it has to push southward, which consequently makes Midtown go southward, gaining the Independence Parks neighborhood, which many of them are socially integrated into the Midtown area as opposed to, say, Southside where they currently are. And also includes some people over in the kind of the Ocean View area, just about 1,500 people. And this is mostly empty right here. So that's Midtown. Oh, and it does gain some folks. Midtown also gains some folks in the UMed area over by kind of next to Baxter, and here's the rest of the University precinct, and here is College Gate as well. So those areas are gained by the Midtown district. Okay, east. The inverse changes that I just discussed apply here. So it loses the University, Baxter, College Gate area. It gains the North Muldoon Finger precinct with access to J-Bear, and it keeps the boundary along Centennial Park and Stuckagan Heights, which is this area over here. And then last but not least, District 6, which is the Girdwood, oh my goodness, the Girdwood, Turnagain Arm, South Anchorage District, which again, the inverse changes apply here. Campbell Lake, it gains Campbell Lake, Independence Park, teensy bit of Ruth Arcane and Ocean View over here. Otherwise, South looks very, very similar as it does now. A lot of folks who submitted maps prioritized really, really low deviation. I think as we saw through the state redistricting kind of quibble and litigation, extremely tight deviation comes at the cost of splitting up communities of interest that otherwise intuitively belong together. So we thought that while deviation protects the one vote, one person concept, extremely tight deviations like 1, 200, 300 people are not as important as keeping neighborhoods who believe they deserve to go belong together and vote together within the same interests. So we respected that principle as opposed to tightest deviations as possible. And another map that I represent will also be doing the same thing, but that's the reason you see you're about to see some really, really tight deviations from the other presenters. I just wanted to kind of flag that. But otherwise, that's the map from Anchorage Action.
Are you ready to do the next one? Why don't you stick around and do your second
Do
map?
the second one?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
since you're here. I think it's number 7, right? Yeah, so just, no, it's number 7. So just click the next one on the tab at the top there. See that?
I have the power, I'm sorry.
It'll just pop. There you go.
Okay, back again. So similar principles, no partisan data used, no incumbent addresses, and communities of interest as opposed to really, really small deviations. This one's a lot different. District 1, downtown, gains J-Bear. This is based on the philosophical belief that J-Bear doesn't just belong with Eagle River and Chugach, which is what everyone assumes. There are multiple points of gate access, and so we think that the burden of J-Bear being integrated with different districts should belong to different districts during this cycle. We thought that would only be fair. So District 1 gains half of J-Bear, mainly the name of the primary J-Bear Government Hill entrance, and then it also absorbs parts of Midtown, following the northern boundary of Northern Lights, so it gains Rogers Park and some of Fireweed, a little bit of central Midtown. And also comes up and grabs areas east or west of Pine Street, including, this would be like officially Russian Jack, and so these are just the areas of South Mountain View and a little bit of Rica, which is where a lot of, that's just one. Oh, and it does bleed into northern Fireweed, but stops it, goes a little bit beyond what is currently the West District boundary. Okay, District 2 is very similar to the status quo. The obvious difference is the inclusion of Hillside. Time and time again, every time redistricting comes along, the Eagle River Chugach District, in order to meet their deviation requirements, constantly includes Muldoon or some area of East Anchorage. Every single decade. There's no reason why it just has to be Muldoon or East Anchorage. We think there are other areas that are more socioeconomically integrated comparatively than is East Anchorage, right? Areas of Hillside and South Anchorage share service areas. They are far more rural. They have a very, very similar median household incomes, whereas the Elmendorf area has an average median household income of about individual income of about 78,000. So these areas are way more similar than, say, what is currently added into the Chugach Eagle River District, which is this North Muldoon precinct that is extremely diverse, far poor, goes to entirely, has entirely different needs than does the J-Bear District. So we think it's only fair to include areas that are more like than just because they're tangentially connected by a precinct or something like that. So we include Hillside into the Eagle River Chugach District. Well, I do, not we. District 3, which is currently west, tries to follow the boundary along C Street, which is what divides Midtown and West. It also loses the Campbell Creek area, as does seemingly the rest of these maps. It also loses some Hillside, some Independence Park, Ruth Arcane, Northern Ocean View sections to Midtown. So it loses those, and other than that, relatively stays the same. Okay, District 4 is Midtown. Obviously, you lose that northern section north of Northern Lights to downtown. You gain a little bit of this Stuck Again Heights kind of blank area. No one lives here. This is where the road access ends and actually meets population. So that's just kind of an anomaly. And I guess I just talked about the previous district as if it were Midtown. Midtown is what adds Independence Park, and a little bit of Ocean View, and a little bit of Ruth Arcane. And then it also gains this little area of University Precinct that for some reason was excluded from the current map, but these are folks who live here to go to the University of Anchorage, Alaska, and should be voting with the same precinct as the people who actually go to that school. So those people are returned to what I think should be their proper district. District 5. District 5 loses the residents of Stuck Again Heights down here in the south. Again, based on the philosophy that they are far more socially, economically integrated with regards to income levels, needs, and services to the Eagle River Chugach area as opposed to East Anchorage. The other map, the Anchorage Action map, reflects them being in East. So those are basically just two different concepts. I think they could debatably belong to either district, but in this one, they're just in order to get population with the Eagle River Chugach District. It returns the North Muldoon finger that we were talking about, which includes Bartlett High School and those areas, and returns them to East. And then it loses the Pine Street University area to those other districts. Last but not least, District 6, which is the Girdwood, Turnagain Arms South Anchorage District. Inverse applications here from the West and Midtown districts. Loses Campbell Lake, loses Ruth Arcane, loses Independence Park. And that's the map.
All right, so actually, if you could come on back up. Thank you, Robert. And we'll have an opportunity for folks who are interested to ask questions when we're done going through all the maps. So next we have Mr. Dunsmore. Are you still there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So I don't know if you're following along on Facebook. Are we Facebook Live right now?
YouTube Live.
Or YouTube Live. So you can see the map as she's working it and try to kind of guide her how she can help you communicate to folks. So go ahead and take the floor. You two have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I do not have that up on my screen right now. But hopefully my presentation will be clear enough to follow along with which districts I'm talking about. Good evening, committee members. For the record, I'm David Dunsmore. With an organization called Alaskans for Fair Redistricting. Alaskans for Fair Redistricting has been involved in redistricting at the state level in every cycle since 2000. This year, under the leadership of our chair, Joelle Hall, we built a coalition of community organizations from across the state. Organizations like the Alaska Public Interest Resource Group, AFL-CIO Alaska, and Native Peoples Action to advocate for fairness in the redistricting process. We follow the state process very closely, and we really appreciate the Assembly creating a public process for municipal redistricting and having this unprecedented opportunity for the public to really be involved in this process at the municipal level, and we were honored to submit a map. The principles undergirding our map, we want to protect communities of interest, that people who share similar interests should vote together. People in similar neighborhoods should be in the same district. And we thought it's really important to protect the one person, one vote principle. For people who haven't been living and breathing redistricting for the last 6 months, the word deviation gets used a lot. It's just a technical word for the statement that every resident of Anchorage's vote should be as equal as possible. So as close to a zero deviation as possible means as close to every Alaskan vote being equal, and a higher deviation means there's more inequality built into the system. And we looked at the results of the state map and tried to, where appropriate, match that to eliminate issues where there might be split precincts between assembly districts. Our map has a 0.13 deviation, which is by far the lowest deviation of any map under consideration, and would be the lowest deviation and therefore the most equal map in the history of the municipality, and that's something we're very proud of. We have compacted contiguous districts with natural boundaries following major thoroughfares and waterways, and we were really looking to correct systemic flaws that have existed throughout the history of the municipality. Starting on our map with District 1, the North Anchorage District. This is similar to the current District 1, but it adds J-Bear as well as the neighborhoods along the gates of J-Bear to allow service members to be in the same district as the services they use off base. This is one of the systemic problems we've been looking to fix, where currently J-Bear has been put in Eagle River despite the fact that there is no public gate access between Eagle River, and the closest gate is actually much closer to the Anchorage Bowl than it is to Eagle River. We really made sure, and we're proud, that we are the only option that is presented that does not dilute the votes of the diverse neighborhoods of Mountain View and Fairview by including neighborhoods in Midtown or West Anchorage in a downtown district, by including the neighborhoods around J-Bear that are similar in both socioeconomic and diversity to Mountain View and Fairview. We would create a map that actually strengthens these communities' voices, unlike the other options that would have the unfortunate side effect of stifling the votes of the most diverse communities in the country. District 2 is the Chugach Mountains District. As I said earlier, it removes J-Bear, which is not socioeconomically integrated with Chugach, Eagle River, and the other Chugach Mountains neighborhoods. And it removes the portion of Muldoon that under the previous map was gerrymandered into Eagle River. Instead, we put the neighborhoods in the hillside east of Elmore in with the Chugach Mountains District because these are neighborhoods on the Chugach Mountains. They have large lot sizes. They have limited road service areas. So just like Chugach Eagle River that has its own elected board that manages road service, most of the limited road service areas that have their own elected boards would finally be able to be in the same district with the larger Chugach Eagle River one to provide a district that compactly, contiguously, and socioeconomically integrated represents the needs across the greater Chugach Mountains region. Moving to District 3, which is West Anchorage, for most of it, we're able to use Minnesota as a boundary, which this is a major freeway that provides a really clear delineation between Midtown and West Anchorage. And we're able to put both sides of Campbell Lake in the same district and into the same district as the other Midtown Lakes neighborhoods with like Campbell Lake and Sand Lake, so that all of the Lakes neighborhoods that share similar interests will be able to be in the same district. And we removed Midtown neighborhoods like Spenard from West Anchorage and allowed them to stay in Midtown. District 4 is the Midtown district. It's a compacted, contiguous district. The Midtown neighborhoods between Minnesota and Elmore. We worked really hard to keep Midtown intact, and we're glad that our district is able to keep the Midtown neighborhoods like Airport Heights, Rogers Park, and Fireweed within the Midtown district, and to have Lore as the southern boundary, which is a natural divide between the more Midtown facing districts and the more South Anchorage facing out of Loop districts. District 5 is the East Anchorage district. It goes to Elmore Burgaw as the main boundary, which is again a major thoroughfare and a natural boundary between Midtown and East Anchorage. And District 6 is the South Anchorage and Turnagain Arm district. This includes the Turnagain Arm communities of Girdwood, Indian, Potter, as well as the Turnagain Arm neighborhoods in South Anchorage, the neighborhood of Rabbit Creek, and the Abbott Loop areas up to Laurel Road to keep those well-connected neighborhoods in the South Anchorage, Turnagain Arm area within the same district. And I will have to get off this call shortly, but our chair, Joelle Hall, is present, and if members have questions, I'll be able to get answers to you through email. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunsmore. And then the last two maps are done by Mr. Denny Wells. Mr. Wells? Welcome. Same, have 5 minutes for each of the maps.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the committee for the opportunity to present tonight. My name is Denver Wells. I'm a lifelong Alaskan, a 20-year Anchorage resident, and have lived in Sand Lake for the last 15 years. When I submitted my public comment and included draft maps, I was not anticipating being heard, much less being asked to present my maps in person. I am especially appreciative of Mr. Constant's follow-up when I had technical difficulties submitting my maps, and I'm thankful to RDI and Ashley for converting my maps into a format you see online. I specifically appreciate those efforts. When I saw the initial 5 maps, the first thing I noticed is that my neighborhood is included in the South Anchorage District 5 in all 5 of the initial drafts, and subsequently in 2 more of the additional drafts. I live on North Shore Drive between Diamond and Campbell Lake. My neighborhood elementary school is Kincaid. My neighborhood is geographically and economically connected to Sand Lake, but is separated from South Anchorage by a lake. I would have to transit District 3 to get to the proposed District 6 in many of these maps. I understand that the redistricting task itself requires imperfect local compromises, and my maps themselves have their own imperfect compromises. But seeing 0 options where my neighborhood was rationally allocated was what prompted me to give feedback. I'm not a politician or a community leader. I don't have a personal vested interest other than the positive effects that aggregate to the community by having equitable representation. I made my maps with the intent of having them as compact as possible. keeping similar communities together as much as possible, having them be as population balanced as possible, and maintaining the current 6 conceptual districts as much as possible: downtown, Eagle River, Sand Lake, Midtown, Muldoon, and South Anchorage. My first map was focused on keeping the downtown district as compact as possible. Let me see if I can make the computer behave.
Ashley, you might need some technical assistance on this.
I got it. Just trying to hold my paper and run a mouse at the same time. My first map was focused on keeping the downtown district as compact as possible. That's map number 9. District 1 is bounded by J-Bear to the north, Northern Lights to the south. It is bounded by the inlet and the railroad to the west, and Boniface to the east. On the north, it looks like a substantially different boundary than the current one, but the differences between that and the current one are all 0 population areas. So it was just to have a clean line. This extends into parts of existing Midtown, Muldoon, and Sand Lake districts, but since District 1 is expanded to 2 members, some expansion is inevitable. District 2 is Eagle River and Chugach. Let's see here, zooming out a bit. District 2 is Eagle River and Chugach. As others have noted, there's not sufficient population there for a standalone district. I added J-Bear and Stuckagon Heights to make an equitable sized district. J-Bear is a natural pairing both because it is the current pairing and because Eagle River is heavily populated with active duty military. Stuckagon Heights is an unfortunate compromise. It is certainly better than pairing Muldoon or Girdwood with Eagle River, and it is more compact and it is a more compact and discrete neighborhood than dissecting Hillside. The demographics and rural road service issues are similar between Stuckagon Heights and their neighbors across the ridge on Highland Road. District 3 is bounded by, let's see. District 3 is bounded by the inlet to the west and north, Campbell Lake and Diamond to the south, and Arctic and Sea and the railroad to the east, and a small portion of Northern Lights along the southern edge of District 1. District 4 goes from Northern Lights through Independence Park, north of O'Malley. Independence Park has been a pretty common addition into the Midtown district in many of these maps. District 5 is the rational part of Muldoon from the Glen Highway to the north down to Tudor to the south. Unfortunately, that was going over to Boniface. That was not quite enough population, so I included a section of the UMed district over to Lake Otis. And then South Anchorage, as many have noted, ends up being the rest. This large square around Campbell Airstrip, again, is, as with the slight shape oddities at the north edge of District 1, is also an area that is a 0 population area. After reflecting on this map, I realized that I wanted to make a second attempt that emphasized the compactness of District 5 for Muldoon rather than the compactness of District 1. This is map 10. I started with the core Muldoon corridor in District 5, from the Glen Highway down to Tudor again, and it extended it over to Pine. I was unable to extend the Pine corridor all the way down to Tudor and still have a correct population distribution, and so there's a small area at the southwest where the South Fork of Campbell Creek is the border. I kept District 2 the same. District 1 was adjusted and extended south to 36th. And then I made slight changes to the other districts to get proportional. I'm having trouble running a mouse. To get proportional distributions, again, following C Street and the railroad corridors, and this time Minnesota instead of Arctic. For the boundary between districts 3 and 4, District 4 again including Independence Park, and the South Anchorage district, kind of getting the remainder of the inlet and South Anchorage. As a real estate photographer, I am in homes throughout the Anchorage Bowl. I've shot more than 2,000 homes in the municipality in all parts of town, from the tiniest rundown single-wide trailer to the most amazing million-dollar homes, from places in the densest parts of the 1990s zero-lot line craze to the furthest reaches of the Eagle River Valley, from homes so new the paint is not yet dry to homes so old they're on historic registers. I was mindful of that experience as I was crafting my maps, and I encourage you to be mindful of the whole community as you draft your official maps. I was also attempting to make the maps as compact and and with minimal deviation as possible. I believe mine kind of strike a middle ground. They're very compact. They're not the lowest deviation, but they're not 5 to 7% deviation either. I urge the adoption of maps that are fair and compact, and thank you again for the opportunity to present. I'm genuinely grateful.
And I'm glad you reached out when you weren't able to get your comments up, because otherwise it would have been the memory hole. It just would have disappeared. So thank you for being persistent in getting your information. And to everybody who submitted a map, thank you for proving that the public process works, that the contractor submitted 4 maps, which was a lift, and then the public took it upon itself to submit 6 additional maps, which I think is more than the state got for their process. I'm not certain of that, but I think it's true. I think they just got a couple. And so, no? Okay, someone's correcting me. They had a few, not too many more than this then. It was pretty parallel. And so with that, go ahead. We may have you back for questions, or we're going to set up a mic down here, and maybe we use this one. Oh, okay. So I guess we can use Mr. Rivera's mic. He can come over here, and we can share a mic. And Mr. Weddleton, too. You might be needed for question answering. You don't get 3 minutes. You had your 3 minutes. You get your 3 minutes plus next time. So the next part of the agenda is where we open up the microphone. Members of the public will have up to 3 minutes to give us comments or ask questions if they want. This is a town hall format, so members up here may answer questions if we're so moved and have a response that's meaningful to what you're querying. So we have a microphone here if you want to line up and come give us your thoughts on the process or the outcomes that you're hoping to see. Please state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. I'll be keeping the time.
I'm Russ Reno. I'm from District 1 in downtown area there. I guess maybe I missed something, and correct me please if I'm wrong. Why is the dark red on these maps, is that what it's currently?
Yes.
But that's not what my map looks like that I've used for years of the downtown community council. I just don't understand why they've already been changed.
They haven't been changed.
Well, if you look at the one that's on muni.gov, it does not look anything like that. It does not include that for downtown. It stops at 9th Avenue. It goes up to Campbell or Ingram, and crosses down and in a straight line behind there.
I think you might be talking about the community council boundaries.
Yes, that's what I was asking. Is that different?
This is the district boundary.
Okay,
This is the entire
that's what I needed
district line.
clarification
It's
on.
downtown Fairview, South Edition, Government Home, Mountain View.
Gotcha. Thank you. Now that makes sense. I now know what page we're on. So my next question is then, maybe you could answer this, Chris, if you feel you're able. I am just concerned about, you have 5 different downtown community councils in your district, correct?
Right now.
So that's what we've been trying to eliminate from the very beginning. This has been the whole sole purpose on our side, why we pushed so hard to support you on this. What does this mean for the downtown community councils? Because I hear a lot of terms that I wrote down here, like that the only additions, the only changes that have been made is differences in 0 population areas. And what I see here is they've added a lot of huge population areas to where we are. And this tells me that I'm kind of concerned, is our vote still gonna count downtown? Because one person, one vote doesn't really work in the whole eye, and that's what we were looking for, was more of a say in what happens in our area, because we kind of get lost with the downtown partnership stepping in there and the coalition stepping in there and making the decisions for our area. And then if we're gonna have even less of a vote now that we're being incorporated into, so what does that exactly mean for the councils?
So the number of people in the district currently is roughly 25,000. The number will be increasing to 48,541 plus or minus. So we will have more neighbors within our district, and we will have more community councils. But we will also then have 2 assembly members who can work on the issues that are important to the entire district. And so that's the fundamental change that really established the need, or the declaration that made the proof the declaration of apportionment was in order. Proposition 12 added that 12 members. So yes, we were going to have approximately 3 or 4 more community councils in the district, but there will be 2 people you can appeal to and call to and demand from what you need from the city.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. And then it's just a brief statement, if I may probably be over my 3 minutes here. But I just wanted to know and encourage you guys to make sure that we don't get less of a representation downtown, because we have had to battle a lot of bureaucracy downtown, which is getting simple things for the residents in our community. Thank you so much.
I agree with that mission. Thank you. Again, please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Irene Queen now. I want to just make some initial comments. I'm still learning. I really like the 2 maps from Mr. Wells. I really appreciate the fact that he is stressing to keep them compact and look at the communities, not just how much they make and all of that. I'm part of like a Buy Nothing group. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. They're all over Anchorage. There's different areas, and it's all about building community, and it's in the Sand Lake area, and I like to keep the communities together. And so I really appreciate the 2 maps he made. I also appreciate the fact that the deviation is small. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I looked at the Alaska 4-pair redistricting map, and there are 2 things I do not like is that J-Bear is part of downtown, because I do think that a lot of the people do go to Eagle River and participate in things there, so that would be more of their community. And then the other thing, where District 2 goes all the way down to South Anchorage, you know, the rural part, South Anchorage has 2, with Potter Heights and Indian and Girdwood and all of that. And, you know, when you look at the road system, you can't get from Eagle River to South Anchorage unless you drive all the way through Anchorage. And in terms of community, if somebody in that area down in South Anchorage has a garage sale, it's very unlikely that people from Eagle River will come. So, like I said, this is not an income thing, it's a community thing. And so why would that area of South Anchorage go with Eagle River? That just does not make any sense to me. But that's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
Well, we're glad to hear your personal opinion. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the public who wish to give us feedback and input on the reapportionment conversation? Again, welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Gretchen Stoddard. I live on Arboretum Street in District 6, near some of the areas that are, you know, on the edge in some of these maps. I also many thanks to the man who made maps 9 and 10. I think maps 6, 9, and 10 show me that we can have something equitable, you know, that neighborhoods are together, and it can, you know, I feel you guys can meet all the parameters without having Rabbit Creek and Chugach in the same district. It's, you know, it's going to be hard for you guys to show your face. If you want to, it's fine. I'll be bringing it up for the next 20 years at Halo candidate forums. And I would definitely like to hear Suzanne loudly state in front of people that, it's going to be difficult for it doesn't make sense to me to have South Anchorage and Chugach Eagle River in the same district, even though you can look on a map and they look together. We all know the roads you have to drive, especially since most of the maps that have us, South Anchorage and Chugach in the same district, are saying that J-Bear has to have a direct driving connection to downtown. I don't understand why that driving connection is so much more important than Upper DeArmond to Chugach being very disconnected. So, but thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome, please state your name.
My name's Julie Colomb, District 6. So one thing I wanted to comment on whether downtown goes to J-Bear or if it goes southeast. I was just on the public input meeting on the Glen Seward Mobility Project. So knowing that's coming, it seems to make sense to have the downtown go south and east. Those people need, a project that size, you need to have compact representation. J-Bear can go to Eagle River easily. And I don't live in those districts, but what I found out tonight, it seems like it would be important for them to have two representatives dealing with that project. It seems it would be hard to split that up. And from what most of the maps that go south and east, they would cover most of the area being looked at with the Seward Glen Mobility Project. I also like 9 and 10 to pull Bartlett, that section to Bartlett and Muldoon and keep it East Anchorage. I like that. And Stuckagon Heights with Eagle River, that seems to make way more sense. So I prefer 9 and 10, but I would just in general, when you look at downtown, I mean, you know it better than me, but just from what I found out about that project, it seems to make more sense to make it go south and east than into J-Bear. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coleman. You're welcome. Please state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Niall Sherwood Williams. That ramp is pretty steep. So I assume that we're going to have more of these forums and chances to really make our opinions known to our elected officials. I have less comments on the particular maps, and my first comment is the color coding does not work for those that are colorblind. So I would like to see with each map if we could have some addendums that have each district in black and white with the streets that border clearly marked, and maybe the house numbers and the cross streets just to make it clear for the people. One of my concerns in this process was what type of data were people using to be able to make these maps. So I came in at the tail end and I heard Mr. Wells, and he was speaking about some things with population. So to have that information, we need to know like what houses are in the area, who lives there, how many people, possibly their names. So I was just wondering how the Fourth Amendment rights of Anchorage citizens were protected in this process.
The U.S. Census data was used.
U.S. Census data. So I would just like to see a clearer black and white map of each of them for all 10. So that would be 60 addendums to be added. I'm sure they are out there. Another thing with the written comments out there, I would assume that they'll be preserved as part of the public record. And I think maybe that we should ask that members of the public write their name, because no one wrote their name out there, at least on the few comments that were written. when I came in. And that's about all I have for this time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Yeah, just a question, Mr. Constant. Is this supposed to be question and answer or public testimony? 3 minutes?
It's either way, 3
It's the
minutes.
same.
It's right now, we have 3 minutes for an individual to speak, and because it's a town hall format, questions are proper.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess first question regarding the new files that were uploaded. When will the shape files be available for those online? Question directed toward your contractor.
We can make, I mean, they are available through the portal already, so we can just add an option to download them directly from the map viewer.
Okay, that'd be nice. That'd be good to get that option. I guess I really just have one major question for kind of the body, and that really is, first off, what is the process for deciding of all these maps, which one you're actually going to choose? And then with that, how are you going to ensure that, although we are technically a non-partisan city because we're non-partisan positions, how are we going to ensure that partisanship is not included in this decision? I'm going to say that in speaking on my personal capacity.
I mean, demonstrate where the partisanship has come for us. There isn't. At this time, we opened the process up to the public. We put a date on the map, we broadly advertised it, and we have now 10 maps in the process. The committee will be deciding how it will be moving through to narrow down maps until we get to a final item.
Okay, so can you clarify how you're going to select of those maps? What is the process now for selecting one of these 10 maps?
There's a committee meeting tomorrow morning in which that discussion will be the next phase.
So that hasn't been decided yet, that's tomorrow?
No, yeah. There was a previous discussion about trying to pick one map tomorrow, but I think that there's going to be a proposition to not do that because there are other town halls that are already scheduled that weren't in the previous conversation happened, and we want to make sure those town halls have the full benefit of all the maps so they can put the same level of thought into their responses. So yeah, we will be having that conversation tomorrow.
Gotcha. Well, thank you.
Thanks for the questions, Mr. Lewis. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Welton. Don't drop the mic.
Hi. So I want to be clear, so tomorrow's a work session, so there will be no, is it a meeting?
It's a committee meeting.
Okay, so a committee, but, I mean, there's no decisions made there.
No.
We talk about things, but we can't make a decision unless it's a formal meeting, as you know, so. We may have a direction identified, no decision.
Yeah, the committee can make a recommendation to the body, but the body makes the decisions going forward. That's a pretty standard process.
And a follow-up to that regarding, I guess, your timeline. It seems a bit short to have the decision made tomorrow. I guess it's going to hit the addendum to the agenda for the introduction. Is that the goal?
Yeah, so what I said was because we have a bunch of other items and opportunities of public interest that are now newly calendared, the decision making isn't going to happen tomorrow. And so what is likely to happen tomorrow is a discussion about how we get to the introduction on the 15th of an item. What that item looks like will be discussed tomorrow. And then we will work through the steps. There's no decision made.
Okay, and then regarding the public hearings, so I noticed you had a special meeting set for that, for the public hearings, is that correct?
Two
special meetings?
No, one special meeting and the next regular meeting.
So I
public
guess,
hearings.
if I can ask, how was the decision, or has that decision been made yet to have a special meeting on that? And then secondarily, why was the decision made for a special meeting rather than just incorporating it into 2 regular meetings? To allow for a more general audiences to participate?
Yeah, we just have been working on this now. I've been working on it 7 years, but we've been working thoroughly in the process to get the items moving forward. And we set a timeline in early November. It was finalized in early January, and that's just the way that the dice fell. So we decided there was a special meeting. We wanted to make sure we had 2 opportunities for the public to be heard. One at a regular meeting, which is the first. And the process may take longer. We'll see.
That was the first I noticed that we had a special meeting for it too, but it's also on a different day, it's on a Thursday, and I think that's actually helpful, because some people can't come on a Tuesday, maybe they come on a Thursday, so, I think there's an advantage in that, it might be slight, but, some people are gonna work every Tuesday and can't come.
Plus 3 town halls, plus an open process and period for members of the public to submit any comments and maps and everything. So for sure, the process is not deficient in any way at this time for public opportunity for input. there are plenty of opportunities still.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys have done a good job at, advertising and ensuring that that is very public. I guess my contention is that for something that only happens every single 10 years, as you mentioned, Mr. Constance, is a very big deal.
Yeah.
And because it happens every single 10 years, I would contend that even more than 2 public hearings at a regular meeting, 2 regular meetings, and potentially even a special meeting would be more appropriate to accommodate, yes, people who are unable to make it on Tuesdays, but as well as people who can make it on Tuesdays to allow for more awareness of it. Because on the outside, it sure does look like when you're putting on a special meeting, they're trying to hide and they're covering up in that sense. So,
Certainly, you're welcome to that opinion. Thank you.
of course, thank you. In my personal capacity.
Yeah, of course. That's fine. I just think we've leaned hard towards open and robust public process. And in fact, there are 6 maps here made by people who are in the public and 2 at least that have never made maps before. And so I feel like I can very comfortably stand on the fairness and openness of this process. But that's up for deliberation. It's the membership's question, not mine alone. Other members of the public wish to be heard?
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Joelle Hall. I'm the chair of Alaskans for Fair Redistricting. And I wanted to just, if you have permission to read, is that okay with you?
No worries.
All right. This is a Supreme Court decision from 2002 that's germane to some of the dialogue we've had here tonight. And this is in part. The board considered and rejected Anchorage plans with significantly lower maximum deviations, apparently because these plans did not respect the board's conception of neighborhood boundaries. But as we held in Grove versus Egan, the Anchorage neighborhood patterns cannot justify substantial disparities in population equality across the Anchorage districts. Anchorage is by definition socioeconomically integrated. Its population is sufficiently dense and evenly spread to allow multiple combinations of compact, contiguous districts with minimal population deviations. Accordingly, the Anchorage deviations in that map were unconstitutional and were remanded to the board. I bring this up because some of these maps have deviations that are really high. Those are probably unconstitutional. If your threshold for declaring yourself malapportioned is 10%, that isn't the limit. That's actually also the trigger that you declare yourself malapportioned by. So to say it's the limit and it's also the trigger by which you malapportion yourselves, it can't be both, right? So this number, the lowest number, it really does matter. The other thing I want to say into the record is there's going to be contention about how we divide up this city. There's always going to be. Eagle River must get population from somebody. It's mathematically impossible for them not to. I live in Eagle River. This is my district. I'm a military veteran. I live in a military family. But that does not mean that I'm entitled to all the population on J-Bear, nor is Eagle River. We're all part of the same town, and we should be looking at these things to divide this up the best way we possibly can. These deviations matter. Secondly, it isn't, people are concerned, and rightly so. Everybody likes things the way they are. But if you were in Muldoon, you don't like being with Eagle River either, right? So maybe this is a matter of nobody's gonna like it, you don't like it, but somebody's gonna have to do it. And so I understand the concern, but my point is, this community, Eagle River does not automatically get J-Bear, and Muldoon shouldn't always have to be the one. Thanks.
So I have a question for you on that.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this quite a bit. Some argue that, well, the people who work on J-Bear live in Eagle River.
Well, some must.
Right? But if you think about it that way, where are they represented?
They're represented in their homes.
In their homes, not where
Right.
they work, right? And so I think there's a very important kind of element to think about in that context. Because even if a number of people from base live out in Eagle River, that doesn't warrant making Eagle River onto J-Bear, right? It's where you live, not where you work.
Right, and there is as many people who live in the Anchorage half of this that live more than live in the Eagle River side. So this is it's a point of speculation inside the creation of these maps. And there's more than one map here that that reached around to create this fairness and this parity because we need to have more than one community. Yeah, the Muldoon finger, I love it. The Muldoon finger, there they sit, absorbed, never to be heard from again, and with no real voting power because they don't have the ability to elect anybody from their community. And if you pair Eagle River and the Hillside in relatively equal numbers, you get a chance so that there's real parity in both of those communities to elect somebody, one of the two members from each side. It really does create the maximum amount of fairness for those people. There's no ability to elect somebody on J Bear. I suppose there's some, but it's remote. And the ability for somebody to get elected on the Muldoon finger, non-existent. But if you do have that parity, if you divide that up relatively evenly, then each of those communities has a chance.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to be heard? Oh, Mr. Welton has a question. Far away.
You got it.
Yes. So, with that part of the hillside that would go to District 2, how does the population compare? My sense is that it's dwarfed by Eagle River, but you have the numbers?
There would be around, I think if I remember right, 12 or 15,000 people. Eagle River has 32,000 people, is that right? I think that's what I think I asked this question earlier. So there's 12 or 13,000 people who will come out of the hillside and 30,000 on the other. But that's a matter of campaigning, right? That's a matter of work that you could elect one from each. But you can't do it with 4,000 people out of Muldoon. But we could rectify that. You could take more people out of the hillside.
So, other members of the public wishing to be heard? I'm not hearing any. So next we're going to move to the part where assembly members, if they wish on the phone, have an opportunity to ask questions of either the map makers or the contractor. It's not a time for open debate about maps, but now would be the time. So if you are on the phone still, send me a text if you want to add a question or put something on the table. I see Mr. Rivera with a mic, which means he's ready to go. He's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, there's been a lot of discussion about deviation today, and I appreciate it. So, I guess I have two questions, and they're sort of the opposite of each other. And I welcome any of the map makers, including our contractor, to add. So, why is a small deviation important? What does it add in terms of equal representation and the philosophy of one person, one vote? Opposite of that, why is a small deviation meaningless? What benefits are there to not focusing so much on deviation? So I'd love to hear responses to both.
Before Mr. Wheeler answers, because I see him taking up the mic, I want the public to know that Mr. Wheeler is not acting in his legal capacity here. He is acting as our contractor with maps and kind of a thoughtful member of the community with history, with redistricting. And so just please note for the record, he is not our attorney. He is not providing anybody legal advice in this time. But he does have an opinion, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rivera, the primary driver for that goal of reaching a small deviation is the federal and state constitutional concepts of equal protection, one person, one vote. So, in theory, if 10 people in one district are trying to vote for their favorite candidate or their favorite issue, and another district has 5, the district with 5 is considered to have more power per vote than the district with 10 people. So if you can equalize those, the concept is that there's a more equal balance of power in terms of their voting strength.
Could you add to that some about the federal kind of principle of one person, one vote? Because this is not just a local issue, right?
Right, it's driven by both federal and state constitutional principles.
Right, and so the federal apportionment is based on your state and how many people live in your state relative to all the other states and the number of people in a district. And so our rules essentially are set by that principle down.
And if I might continue on the flip side of your question about, in the opposite direction, of course, as people have eloquently said here, is there's this concept of neighborhoods and being compact and socially and economically integrated.
So you can have some deviation, right? Because you have to take into account those factors as well. On top of, then again, as I mentioned earlier, Voting Rights Act issues with respect to minority representation and what impact that might have.
Thanks. For my part, I'd like to hear multiple perspectives.
Anyone else? Robert, go ahead. Mr. Hockenberg.
So I kind of flagged this when I presented the maps, but while one person, one vote with regards to deviation is obviously important, the second half of the question that was asked is why would deviation be less important, or why would focusing on minimal deviation create other negative impacts that impact representation? So like if you draw a district that is the current District 2, which is Jay Bear, Chugach, Eagle River, Peters Creek, Fire Lake, and the Chugach Mountains, you lack about 1,500 people needed to create a perfectly deviated District 2, right? The current district solves that or recommends that by adding the North Muldoon figure, which is about 1,600 people. And while you've created the standard of one person, one vote by making sure the district has minimal deviation, as was just discussed, you screw the people of North Muldoon by putting them into a district where they have no functional voting power and where people of color are disenfranchised from any representative they may want to currently elect. If you notice, there's only been one instance where that district has ever voted for a Republican, and it was in 2020, and that was like super, super rare. So I mean, it's very obvious you can look at voting records and the impacts of gerrymandering to see what happens when you focus on deviation too much. Whereas, if you focus on communities of interest and keeping them together, like some of these maps with slightly higher deviation but better community of interest and compactness do, you actually make sure that everyone has one person, one vote. Because this is just by the census numbers, right? It's not by voting age population, which are the actual people that engage in our elections and the actual people who are going to be participating in elections in these districts. So I think minimal deviation, but we saw the impacts of that during the state redistricting process, which included these insane pairings of Eagle River and Muldoon and parts of central Midtown and parts of like Turnagain and Spenard and West Side that make absolutely no sense to the average person who lives in Anchorage and knows what that's supposed to look like. But they said, well, we need minimal deviation because the technology has improved. Yeah, but so has our understanding of what community of interests belong together, because now they have more power, they have the internet, they have community councils, etc. So I think the middle line needs to be told when we create these maps personally.
Thanks. And so I did have a second question. Do you mind if I ask that one now?
Denny wants to speak.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I was just gonna kind of echo both of these to say the one person, one vote thing is important, both conceptually and also legally, as is compactness and maintaining communities together. And I think they need to be reasonably well balanced. And I think the comment earlier about 10% being our reapportionment threshold, and not necessarily like an upper target for our deviation, is pretty accurate. But the flip side of that is I don't think we need to be targeting zero deviation and coming up with really unusual, awkward boundaries. And I think some middle ground needs to be drawn, and with low deviation, but not necessarily zero, to have compact, rational boundaries.
All right, second, next question, third question.
Thanks. Okay, so then the second sort of line of questions that I had is around this idea of communities of interest. So, that term snuck into today's conversations. I don't think I heard it yesterday, but I appreciate it because it is a term that I know, I am aware of. It's used. It's actually a term of art in many states of over 48 with a legal definition, and you can actually look up what are communities of interest. So just curious, when people use that term, what do they mean by that?
I guess that would be back to Robert or Denny or map makers or, okay, go ahead, Steve. Yeah, there's multiple.
It's not there anymore. Thanks, Claire.
So this is the heart of the question here today, right?
Please say your name.
I'm Joelle Hall. Communities of interest. So it can be your neighbors. It can be people who live in like can be places in the state context, it can be in which you have commercial relationships, or you have a road connecting you. Some of those things are enough to want to be communities of interest in the state level. In the case of, the main contentious point we're having here is what to do about Eagle River, right? Is the community of interest of Eagle River automatically J-Bear? Have we ever asked J-Bear if that's their community of interest, or have we ever asked them if it's Anchorage? We don't know. We rely on anecdotal information to make an assumption about what they want. We don't know their community of interest, J-Bear is. Whether or not they're necessarily a community of interest in conjunction with J-Bear, with Eagle River, they're proximal, I get it, they're right next door. But then you have Muldoon. Is Muldoon a community of interest with Eagle River? Most definitely not. But let's make the converse argument. And somebody, actually Mr. Hoffman talked about it earlier today because he's also got an Eagle River Chugach map. People in Eagle River, myself, I have a well, I have a septic, I live in a road service area. So who am I most like? People on J-Bear? No, they don't live in those conditions in terms of the services supplied to me by the municipality of Anchorage, right? Members Allard and Kennedy, I would talk to them about my well, I would talk to them about all those other things, and so would people on the hillside. So the question is, for the acquisition of municipal services, what is the community of interest? What are the like parties? There's lots of ways to look at this, right? There is proximity, which is certainly important in the Constitution. But we're having an argument about the conversation about which community is suitable to pair with which community. And I see no rationale that says Muldoon is remotely compatible with Eagle River in any way, shape, or form. Yet there it has been for 10 years. J-Bear? Sure, there'll be people who live in Eagle River who use services on the J-Bear, but clearly, a vast majority of them access services in Anchorage. So the question is, what is Eagle River's community? Let's think about it. Who are they most like, right? To me, this is the question. Because proximity is challenging here. Contiguous by mountains is constitutional. These are really technical aspects, right? But we got to think about these things in terms of who are the communities and how do you maximally satisfy it. I get it. None of this is going to be perfect.
I'm going to step in and read from a basic document on reapportionment and the definition they give. What is a community of interest? Community of interest is a neighborhood community or group of people who have common policy concerns and benefit from being maintained in a certain district. Another way of understanding of community interest is that it is a simple way for community to tell its own story about what neighbors share in common and what makes it unique when compared to surrounding communities.
Yeah, thanks for reading that definition. I guess the reason that I asked the question is because I think as we have learned, you may have a definition, but you might have 10 different readings of that same definition.
Absolutely, that's the truth. I want to dispute that.
Mr. Constant, one of the members on the phone wants to speak.
Please.
Miss Allard, do you want to ask your question now or make your comment?
Yeah, thank you very much. My comment is, I understand there's some concerns about Northeast Muldoon, but I just wanted to hit on a couple of points. One was in regards to Fort Richardson and Elmendorf. We keep lumping them together. They are two completely different installations under one umbrella, and that is for military reasons, for command leadership. So I just wanted to make that part clear. The other thing is that looking at the numbers from Fort Richardson, I can tell you, and I don't know how many other people at this meeting have, but I lived on J-Bear, actually Fort Richardson, for 2 years when we first moved here. So I actually have quite a bit of experience when it comes to where my children went to school. I drove them to Eagle River, where they were going to go to high school, Eagle River. The kids who live on Fort Richardson are bused to Eagle River High School. When you're in Eagle River, when you're picking up your children, you do business in Eagle River. I established everything that we have in Eagle River. I'd also like to make the comment that there's 12,000, I think 12,500, I will get with Randy think our population, Chugach Eagle River, is just about 35,000. So that would put us about the 50,000 buffer, 48,000 buffer. So and then my other comment would be, when I hear that we are not relatable, or that Muldoon is not relatable to Eagle River, Chugach, let me explain my perspective on why I know and believe we are. If you look at the elected officials that have been nominated or elected in those areas, state representatives, you're looking at Republicans through and through. The Northeast Muldoon, that book that is currently represented by myself and Ms. Kennedy, had elected Republican Gabby Ledoux. When Gabby was done, and this started, I think Gabby was first elected back in 2014, then she was, David Nelson, who's a representative Republican, then won that district. So when people state that that district is not conservative, that's not true. And in fact, I won that district, and I can't remember if Ms. Kennedy did, but in my assembly race, I won that district. So what I'm trying to say is, when you're trying to put communities together, it is about values, it's about demographics, it's about socioeconomics. It all comes together. But you can't just say, oh, well, Muldoon doesn't agree with us. Well, the voting shows that they have. And I also wanted to point out, Ms. Kennedy had brought up the fact that we are connected to Hillside, or we're connected to Girdwood. We would literally have to ride a Dall sheep in order to get to those areas, unless we drove approximately from our location almost an hour to get to probably 45 minutes to get to Hillside, and approximately an hour and a half to get down to Girdwood. And I would also point out that when folks are saying that we have things in common over there, I would point out, look at who their elected officials are. Suzanne LaFrance and John Weddleton, wonderful people, but you have to still say, oh, okay, what do we really have in common with those areas? We don't. If we did, then maybe the state boundaries would be totally different.
So I think we're
I'm
getting
not really sure what
Ms.
map to
Allen.
go with at this point.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm almost done.
Okay, we're
I'm
getting
not
to the
really
point
sure
where
at
we're
what
debating.
point what map we wanted to go with, or what I have talked to our community about, but I just wanted to broaden that there's a lot of other things that are coming into a decision and impacts Chugach Eagle River. Thank you, Chair, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Wellington was next. Thank you. And we are down to 11 minutes.
Oh, I'm using even half of that. Joel, I had a question, just for critique. So looking at map 10, can we put that right down? So, because, I understand that issue with the Muldoon finger, is that what we call it?
Yeah.
So this one keeps it in District 5. It puts part of the base in downtown, District 1. But it doesn't do that odd feature where a lot of the hillside goes into Eagle River. Is that, it sounds like it meets a lot of your criteria, and the deviation is quite low at 2. So, I don't know, can you critique this one for me?
Wow. I guess I'm not prepared to concede the point that J-Bear belongs to Eagle River. I'm not prepared to concede that point. And this map concedes that point.
And John, I just would add a little wrinkle, like, if we're talking about historic connections, I live on Government Hill. When I bought my house 5 years ago, there were remnant parts of a World War II vehicle that still remain on my property, a shed that was built by the military, still on my property. My neighborhood is literally surrounded by military base. And so when I think about historic connections, I think about my neighborhood. And so there's an interesting conversation to be had there. And obviously, this is not the time.
And I also want to point out, Mr. Weddleton, this district does to Stuck again what our current arrangement does to Muldoon. They're just shifting the 1,400 people around down to Stuck again now. So now, to talk to the people in Stuck again, they would have to drive there. See, Stuck again's in the blue. Yeah. So you have a similar problem to what we have now with this map.
But at least they share MRSA and septic and well. That's not a place with city water or other services that would be comparable to Muldoon, which to me is a very big
Right.
disparity.
But this is literally a stranded population.
So we are now down to 9 minutes. Any other questions from members? So I think I'm gonna, Ms. Queen now? Sure. No, you've already spoken, yeah. We want to start that process over. I think what's gonna happen now is I'll just, if we can put the calendar back up. Claire, I think you might know where that is. So if you look on this calendar, we're just concluding the town hall on the 27th. Not on this calendar is the town hall on the 3rd of February at the Eagle River Town Center at 5:30 p.m., 5:30 to 7:30. And then proceeding forward, it's the intent, if we get there, that an item will be introduced on the agenda for the 15th. It won't be heard on the 15th. It will be heard at a special meeting on the 24th and at the regular meeting on the 1st, and it could be continued to the meeting on the 15th as well. There's no prohibition from that happening to the individual's concern that was brought up before. But ideally, sometime on or about March 1st, thereabouts, within the next week or two, we will hopefully move to the process where we have final selections. Tomorrow, the intent is to have a conversation about how we're going to narrow down and what the process is to get there. And otherwise, you are all invited to continue following the process at reapportionanc.org. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Kennedy corrects me. The town hall is 5 to 7, not 5:30 to 7:30 at the Chugach Eagle River Town Center on the 3rd. So I thought it was 5:30, I misstated. And so with that, I think we're going to wrap up. Any last comments from the members? Nope, I'm going to say thank you, and we're going to adjourn this meeting, everybody. Oh, and one last thing. There are maps out in the lobby. And if you didn't know, there are Sharpies out there. Feel free to mark on those maps any thoughts or suggestions, different lines, boundaries. Tell us which one's your favorite. Those maps are visual, physical elements. You can have part of